Hi everyone, this is Eagle News. I'm Jeff Sanidad in Washington. It's Saturday, February 4th, 2023, here in the nation's capital. This week's recap begins with the International Monetary Fund warning that global growth this year will slow. It has not worsened, but it will slow. Joanne Soriano reports.
The IMF announces that global growth is expected to slow from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. The announcement is made at a press briefing in Singapore to mark the launch of the January update of the World Economic Outlook report.
The global economy will slow down this year before rebounding in 2024. But a global recession is not in our baseline. The important factors shaping the outlook are, on the downside, Russia's war in Ukraine and the global fight against inflation. On the upside, the reopening of China's economy. Overall, we have a mild upward revision to our projections. The global economy has shown a lot of resilience. Labor markets are tight, household spending and business investment remain strong, and European economies proved quite resilient against the energy crisis. Global growth is expected to slow from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. The slowdown will be more pronounced for advanced economies. China and India will account for 50% of global growth. Global headline inflation is expected to fall from 8.8% in 2022 to 4.3% in 2024. Core inflation, however, is more persistent and remains too elevated. To sum up, barring new shocks, 2023 could be the year of turning points, with growth bottoming out and inflation decreasing.
The global economy is poised to slow this year before rebounding next year. However, the risks to the outlook remain tilted to the downside, even if adverse risks have moderated since October and some positive factors seem more relevant.
The balance of risks to the outlook remains tilted to the downside, but is less skewed toward adverse outcomes than in the October year. Some upside risks have become more relevant. On the downside, China's recovery could stall with spillovers to the rest of the world. Inflation could persist at high levels, requiring even tighter monetary policy. An escalation of the war in Ukraine remains a major risk to the global economy. And a sudden repricing in financial markets could deteriorate financial conditions, especially for emerging and developing economies. On the upside, strong household balance sheets amid tight labor markets and robust wage growth could help sustain private demand. Easing of remaining supply bottlenecks, coupled with easing labor market pressures, could also allow for a softer landing with less monetary tightening.
Garincha stresses that the global economic outlook hasn't worsened, but the road back to a full recovery with sustainable growth, stable prices, and progress for all is only starting.
Well, first, the fight against inflation has started to bear fruit, but the battle is far from won. Central banks need to raise real policy rates above the neutral level and keep them there until inflation is on a sustained declining path. Central banks and prudential authorities must closely monitor the buildup of risks and vulnerabilities, especially in the housing and non-bank financial sectors. Countries should also roll back the broad and untargeted support they provided households and firms to counter the cost of living crisis, and instead adopt targeted measures to conserve fiscal space, allow the energy price signal to reduce energy demand, and avoid overly stimulating the economy. More progress is also needed on orderly debt restructuring through the Group of 20's common framework. Non-Paris Club and private creditors have a crucial role to play. Supply-side policies should be used to reduce growth bottlenecks, improve resilience, alleviate price pressures, and accelerate the green transition. Finally, urgent action is needed to halt the forces of geo-economic fragmentation and strengthen multilateral cooperation in areas of common interest: international trade, the global financial safety net, public health preparedness, and the climate transition.
Joanne Soriano, New York, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In other news, in Myanmar, UN Special Rapporteur on the situation on human rights there calls on the international community to stand against the junta. Joanne Soriano again with the details.
Nearly half of Myanmar's population is now living below the poverty line. 17.6 million people are expected to be in need of humanitarian aid in 2023. 17.6 million people. That is in contrast to a total of 1 million people who were in need of humanitarian aid before the coup.
The independent UN Special Investigator on Myanmar warns that the country's military rulers plan to seek legitimacy by orchestrating a sham election this year. He calls on the international community to stand firm against military rule, create a coalition of member states to enforce strong coordinated sanctions, and support the Democratic National Unity Government. Speaking to reporters here in New York, the Special Rapporteur says there are 3 things that the junta needs.
Listen, there's 3 things that the junta needs to sustain itself. It needs money, it needs weapons, and it needs legitimacy. The junta does not have legitimacy in the eyes of the people of Myanmar. So what they're seeking to do is to create the veneer of legitimacy in the international community and then project that veneer through their media sources to the population to say, look, we are being accepted by the international community, our power is inevitable, opposition is futile. It's very, very important that they can convey that message.
Andrew stresses that it is extremely important for the international community for member states to be extremely cautious.
And the first and foremost recommendation is to renounce the so-called election that the junta is planning to orchestrate in the middle part of this year. Given the fact that they have failed in large part to secure legitimacy by the international community, given the resolution of the General Assembly shortly after the coup, given what the Security Council, the resolution of the Security Council of December, given the actions of most states, member states of the United Nations, they have been unsuccessful in securing legitimacy. I'm hopeful that at this 2-year mark, that we as an international community are going to examine very closely the role that we have played over the last 2 years. The things that we have done that has not been in the interest of the people of Myanmar, the things that we as an international community have failed to do to support the people of Myanmar and their aspirations for human rights and democracy.
Regarding sanctions, Mr. Andrews has this to say.
We have episodic sanctions on this or that entity, this or that individual. We've had some progress, and believe me, I greatly appreciate the fact that countries have been moving forward with respect to sanctions and pressure, but it's simply not enough, and it's not strategic, and it's not coordinated, and that is precisely what the people of Myanmar need, and really the playbook is Ukraine.
Efforts by the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, to bring peace to the country, which is a member of the bloc, have stalled as fighting continues to rage. In 2021, ASEAN agreed on the so-called 5-point consensus, which calls for a cessation of violence and constructive dialogue, but the junta has ignored it. Divisions in ASEAN have also complicated attempts to resolve the crisis. Joanne Soriano, New York, New York. Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, in Canada, the city of Toronto beefs up security on its public transit system. This after a string of violent incidents scares commuters. Joshua Santillana reports.
Because of the recent series of violent attacks on Toronto's public transit system, more security officers are deployed this week to help monitor and keep subway trains and buses safe. Just this month of January, more than 10 violent incidents happened on a TTC subway station or aboard a TTC bus. These attacks include robbery, stabbing, altercations, and sexual assaults. In these attacks, both civilian passengers and TTC employees were victimized. All of these incidents are still under investigation. but several are believed to be unprovoked and random. More than 50 security guards, 20 community safety ambassadors, and 80 Toronto Police Service officers are now deployed by the city in the hopes that their presence will help de-escalate violent situations and provide visibility, patrolling, and give immediate response if needed. Mayor John Tory says that on top of keeping TTC riders safe, they're also working to address the root causes of violence such as housing problems, mental health, and addiction treatment. Joshua Santayana, Toronto, Ontario, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Several stories from Thomas Likeness today from a library in the United Kingdom, keeping warm those without shelter, to the worst drought plaguing the Horn of Africa in 40 years, to glassblowers in Belgium feeling the pain of high energy costs. These and more on Correspondent at Large.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. Hard times come in many forms. Hardships differ in different parts of the world. Here's a snapshot of how people are coping in 3 regions of the globe. A sign of the times? This is how bad things are in the United Kingdom. This library in a British town offers more than books. It serves as a refuge to the less fortunate trying to survive the winter. In the eastern England town of Ipswich, the library offers a warm place to stay on cold winter days and access to free food. Many people taking advantage of this service are victims of inflation. You know, people on fixed incomes, be they pensioners or people receiving social welfare benefits. Some people just can't afford to heat their homes. Instead, they spend the day at the library to stay warm. There's also a food bank there. It provides donated staples and hygiene products for free. And for those who need it, there are racks of donated clothing. This library in Ipswich even offers free hot drinks and soup on Sundays. There are similar warm spaces across the UK to help vulnerable people. You know, as we emerge from the pandemic, I don't think anybody ever imagined things would get this bad in a developed country. The nomadic herders in the Horn of Africa are looking at the sky, hoping for clouds, hoping for rain, but there's no moisture. The last 5 rainy seasons have failed. That's triggered the worst drought in 4 decades. It affects Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya. And for these nomads, their livelihood is destroyed. Their livestock herds are decimated. More than 4.5 million animals have died since 2021. Another 30 million are at death's door. Pastures have dried up. There's no food, no water for these animals. People who watch over these herds are at a loss what to do. For many, being a nomadic shepherd is all they know. Many end up living in camps for displaced people. They have no other place to go. The next rainy season runs from this March to May, but forecasters say rainfall will likely be below average. Glass blowers in Belgium fear rising energy prices will put them out of business. Christophe Genard watched the gas bill for his furnaces jump to a whopping $6,500 American dollars a month. Faced with having to give up his 20-year career as a glassblower, he was forced to make some changes. He now uses a smaller oven to produce his glassware. He's also switched to propane. But you know, that's still costing him more than $3,000 a month. To keep costs down, he's producing less than he used to, doesn't have to fire up the furnace as often. Genard, though, is not alone in feeling the pinch of higher energy prices. These same soaring costs are affecting other independent businesses in Belgium, be it restaurants, bakeries, even ordinary retail shops. You know, a survey shows that 3/4 of the retailers in Belgium have reduced heating in their shops, and 2/3 have turned off neon signs outside of opening hours. On a brighter note, making movies. That's right, making movies is starting to be big business in this West African country. Since 2018, the number of hour-long TV series produced in Senegal has increased nearly tenfold. There's a hunger for homegrown storytelling that could also be sold to other countries in French-speaking Africa. Even the American streaming giant Netflix is getting in on the act. They've got a Senegal-produced movie set for release later this year. And one regional production company has struck deals with distributors such as Canal Plus and Amazon Prime. To meet the demand for workers in the industry, there's even a film school where would-be movie makers can learn the skills they need. The Institute in Dakar trains screenwriters and directors. And I'll be back in 7 days. In the meantime, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. Thomas I. Likeness, correspondent at large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
25 U.S. states will be receiving a total of $2.7 billion in loan assistance to help rural communities in their electric infrastructure. To tell us more, here's Rosel Feria on this week's Down to Earth.
The United States Agriculture Department, or USDA, is investing $2.7 billion to help dozens of electric cooperatives and utilities. The investment will be made through the Electric Loan Program. USDA says this will benefit 2 million rural people and businesses in 25 U.S. states. The loans include $613 million to help rural utilities and cooperatives install and upgrade smart grid technologies. Smart grid can be a catalyst for broadband and other telecommunications services in unserved and underserved rural areas. This is in addition to improving grid security and reliability. Nearly half of the awards will help finance infrastructure improvements in underserved communities. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
As countries around the globe collectively join the fight against climate change, find out what we need to consider to win the battle. Melissa Potes has the details.
Climate change and its devastating effects impact all kinds of communities across the globe. We are witness to extreme weather conditions, droughts, flooding, and wildfire. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, climate change also worsens the world's current pollution problems. And those that are particularly vulnerable to its impacts are the overburdened and underserved communities. They include low-income households, communities of color, children, the elderly, tribes, and indigenous peoples. The agency underscores the importance of two courses of action: adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation means taking steps not only to adjust to, but also to prepare for both the current and projected impacts of climate change. Mitigation means taking actions to lessen the magnitude and rate of future climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This also includes advancing nature-based solutions. The EPA mentions that in order to combat the impacts of climate change, communities must enhance their adaptive capacity and strengthen their resilience. A leading proponent of enhancing adaptive capacity and strengthening resilience is the United Nations. The UN has created what it calls the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These goals aim for countries to take action to improve lives and spread prosperity throughout a healthy planet. Melissa Potes, Orlando, Florida, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Let's check in with Anna Queen, Las Vegas. Learn why the housing market in Nevada is on a downward trend. Here's Mind Your Business.
Nevada's housing cost continues to trend down due to rising mortgage interest rates and slowing home purchases. Real estate transactions, buying or selling, typically slows down in December through the first few months of the year and eventually picks up again in the spring, according to industry experts. According to a recent report from the Las Vegas Realtors, home values fell for the 7th consecutive month, with the median sales price for a single-family home to $425,000 in December, down 1.4% from November. Compared to the same time last year, it is still up 2.6%, but down almost 12% from $482,000 in May of 2022. Newly built single-family home price in Las Vegas also fell for the 6th consecutive month, with a median price of $449,900. That's down 2.2% from November, but it's still up over 3% year over year. Nationally, builder incentives and a slight decline in mortgage rates in December helped push new home sales up, according to the National Association of Home Builders, or NAHB. We spoke with Macy, a local real estate advisor, about some of those builder incentives.
Builders have a lot more inventory that they're carrying over from last year. So they're definitely offering a lot more incentives, especially when you go with their in-house lenders. They are crediting all closing costs. They're throwing in appliances, which they normally would. They're giving you primary locations, which normally you would be charged an arm and a leg for a lot premium.
NAHB reports across the U.S., sales of newly built single-family homes increased in December by 2.3%, with the median price of $442,100. That number is down 3.7% from November, but still up 7.8% compared to a year ago. New home sales fell in all 4 regions in the U.S. On a year-to-date basis, it is down 23.5% here in the West. Anna Cui, Las Vegas, Nevada, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
From houses on the ground, let's move on to planes in the sky. Aircraft manufacturer Boeing bids farewell to the Queen of the Skies. Myla Simbulan reports.
After more than 50 years, Boeing delivers its final 747 jumbo jet, the Queen of the Skies. This after a ceremony at Boeing's plant in Everett, Washington. The existing fleets of planes are expected to fly for decades more. But in ceasing 747 productions, more than half a century after the aircraft's first flight, Boeing is closing a chapter in the history of civil aviation. Since its first flight in 1969, the giant yet graceful 747 has served as a cargo plane, a commercial aircraft capable of carrying nearly 500 passengers, a transport for NASA space shuttles, and the Air Force One presidential aircraft. It revolutionized travel, connecting international cities that had never before had direct routes and helping standardize passenger flight. Atlas Air ordered 4 747-8 freighters in early 2022. The final one left the factory last Tuesday. Myla Simbulan, Ridley Park, Pennsylvania, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Donning hard hats and safety vests, students from the Boys and Girls Club of Los Angeles go on a field trip. They learn about the racetrack construction as NASCAR prepares for its season opening event, the Clash at the Coliseum. In Los Angeles, California, here are Eva and Alan on EBC Sports International.
Weeks away from the Clash at the LA Coliseum, NASCAR opens its track to invite the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Los Angeles for a tour.
Investing in a STEM future, these students were taught the disciplines involved in pulling off a race of this magnitude.
We're very big into the, trying to grow the STEM program with young kids. It's one of the areas I feel like we have the opportunity to grow. And we have a lot of different opportunities from engineering, physics. If we brought that to the younger generation, we can utilize our sport as a platform.
They're the future of our sport. They're going to be the ones that are going to be designing the race cars of the future, designing the racetracks of the future, bringing their new, fresh ideas to the table on how to put on a major racing event. It's important for us to talk with them and to engage with them. Also to open their eyes to all the different careers that are involved in NASCAR. There are hundreds of careers that can be found within our industry.
My future profession is business finance, which actually I think it has a lot to do with this because all of the sponsorships they get, it's a lot to do with business, and then they say they're all connected everywhere. So I think that'll have a lot to do with my future career.
When I walked in the Coliseum and I saw the track, I expected it to be more than a mile wide, and seeing it right here in person, it's like not even half a mile, so it's crazy to see that there's going to be 25 cars driving in this track.
There was a lot of skepticism when we came here last year. The drivers were saying, there's no way that's going to be any good. And you should have seen all the smiles that were on their faces. Even when the guys that didn't win the race were smiling from ear to ear because it was just such a cool event. And so they've all been talking about it during the off season. They can't wait to get back here to Los Angeles. And there's no bigger way for NASCAR to open up the season than to come to the biggest media market in the United States, or at least the second largest media market in Los Angeles, but nobody does it better than LA.
A quarter-mile track doesn't give much wiggle room for a NASCAR race.
Which only means that the excitement level will be elevated as drivers are forced to expertly thread the needle.
Eva and Alan, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
And because we want to hear from you, know your thoughts, here's our question of the week. What do you think of AI or artificial intelligence? Is it our friend or our foe? Michael Hudson joins us today.
Opinions on the use of artificial intelligence in apps and websites are varied, with some praising its convenience and others raising concerns over privacy and job loss. A recent survey shows a majority of people found AI positively impacting their lives, but a significant minority expressed concerns over data misuse and loss of human interaction.
Well, what I know about artificial intelligence is probably some of the stuff I've seen on movies. Don't know too much about it, but other than it's supposed to help us in our daily, or could help us in our daily lives.
As much with anything that we are taking advantage of right now, it's a tool, it's an invention that hopefully is being used to build us up.
Right now, AI is being used for a lot of things. It's being used for text-based applications like ChatGPT, the AI art generator like Midjourney, predictive algorithms and search.
I definitely think there are ethical concerns regarding AI technologies as advanced as ChatGPT. It's pretty easy to just open up the website and ask it to write an essay, get answers to a test, or even write up a modern web application. But I do think there are a lot of current world limitations to AI that can kind of calm those concerns.
Well, as a software developer, I would say it's a 50-50 decision. It's debatable. I would say I agree because it will actually help us on our daily tasks. And then the other half, I would say I disagree because in terms of data collection, they can actually know your personal information on the spot.
More and more of businesses are going to incorporate AI, whether it's answering phones or doing more customer service type jobs.
As AI usage increases, it's important to weigh its benefits and drawbacks. While it has the potential to revolutionize the way we live and work, the technology is still in its infancy and has limitations, especially with creative tasks as well as human empathy. Michael Hudson, Seattle, Washington, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Before we let you go, let us share with you our photo of the week. It is winter here in the US, but look how warm this image looks. Taken in South Beach in Miami, Florida by Ralph Coronel. Can't wait for the summer. Thank you all for joining us again. If there are stories or topics you want us to share with you, just comment below. View, like, share our other shows. City Limits with Alan Basilyahe. Connected with Dr. David. Take a seat and join us with Anna Cui. Plate Date with Mike Hudson and friends. Plus, Journey, Stories of Filipinos in Canada with Kathleen Cruz. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Eagle News Live. I am Jeff Sanidad. We live in extraordinary times. Happy weekend, everyone!